I stepped into the great hall of the Black Fang tribe to negotiate a peace treaty, but I never expected the tribal chief to point at me and ask a question that made the entire room fall silent. The great hall itself was vast and intimidating. Massive wooden beams soared high overhead, supported by enormous stone pillars carved with the fierce faces of orc ancestors. Fires roared in long copper troughs, casting flickering light and deep shadows across the chamber. On either side stood rows of orc warriors, their muscular forms like living walls, axes and swords resting within easy reach. The air was thick with the scent of smoke, roasted meat, and oiled leather. Every sound echoed sharply off the stone floor. I kept my back straight and my hands visible, trying to project calm I did not feel. All I wanted was for the negotiations to proceed according to protocol. No axes thrown onto the table, no sudden declarations of war. My name was Fenric Vale, 31 years old, unmarried, with no noble blood and no legendary deeds to speak of. I was simply a low-ranking envoy sent from the human city of Greyford to discuss the exchange of salt, iron, and safe passage through the valley. I could read treaties, endure long rides on horseback, and speak enough of the orc tongue to avoid immediate violence from a misunderstanding. That was the extent of my value here. Then the chieftain made his entrance. Tharok Blackfang descended from his stone throne with heavy steps that echoed through the hall. He was a giant even among orcs, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair and a long, jagged scar running across one eye. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and rough, like stones grinding together in a riverbed. Beside him walked a young orc woman, his daughter. She stood with quiet composure, her gray-green eyes calm and alert. Her black hair was neatly braided, and she wore soft, well-made leather rather than heavy battle armor. There was a dignity in her posture that commanded attention, but something about her was different. A warrior standing nearby accidentally dropped the butt of his spear onto the stone floor. The loud metallic clang echoed sharply through the hall. Every head turned toward the sound. The young woman did not. She remained perfectly still, her gaze fixed on her father's lips, then shifting to the hands of the servants nearby, and finally settling on me with intense, focused attention. In that instant, I understood. She could not hear, yet she observed the world with a sharpness and clarity that most people with perfect hearing never possessed. I had expected Tharok to speak of salt shipments, iron ingots, or taxes on the mountain pass. Instead, he raised one massive hand and pointed directly at me. "Do you want to marry my deaf daughter?" The entire hall fell into a stunned silence. One of the other human envoys behind me made a choking sound. My heart slammed against my ribs. There had been no mention of marriage in any of the treaty drafts, no warning, nothing. I looked at the young woman, Lyra. She had not heard her father's words, but she had clearly read them from his lips. She did not lower her head in shame. She did not plead with her eyes. She simply looked at me, steady and composed, as though she wanted to see exactly what kind of man I truly was. In the chieftain's scarred face, I saw prepared expectation. He was waiting for me to refuse, to prove that humans were weak, prejudiced, and quick to reject what was different, to humiliate his daughter in front of her entire tribe. I did not want to be that man. I did not want to give them another reason to see humans as cruel or cowardly. So I met his gaze and answered, my voice clearer than I expected. Yes. A wave of murmurs swept through the hall. Warriors whispered to one another. An elder frowned deeply. Tharok stared at me for a long, heavy moment, as if weighing my soul. Lyra tilted her head slightly, her gray-green eyes changing, and something important had registered within them. Tharok's voice rumbled once more, carrying across the silent hall. "Then you will remain here for 3 days. If, in 3 days, you have not learned how to speak with her, yours will mean nothing but empty wind." I understood perfectly. This was no simple political marriage. This was a test, and I had just willingly stepped into it. After the council meeting ended, a female orc guard with a stern face and scarred arms led me out of the great hall without a word. She guided me along a wide stone veranda that overlooked the deep valley below. The wind carried the sharp scent of pine and distant snow. Lyra was already there, seated at a heavy wooden table, her hand resting flat on its surface as she watched a flock of birds wheel through the narrow mountain clefts. She did not turn at the sound of our footsteps. I approached slowly, my boots scraping on the stone, my heart still hammered from the chieftain's question and my own reckless answer. I stopped a respectful distance away and lifted one hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Hello," I said, my voice sounding foolish even to me. She did not react to the sound. Of course she didn't. Heat rose in my face. I had spoken out of habit, as if words were the only bridge between people. Lyra finally looked up. Her gray-green eyes met mine with the same quiet intensity I had seen in the hall. Without hurry, she reached out and tapped the table once. A servant appeared almost instantly, placing a thin clay tablet and a sharp stylus between us. Lyra took the stylus and wrote with quick, confident strokes. She slid the tablet toward me. "You talk with your mouth too much." I read the words and let out a short, surprised laugh. The sound felt strange in the quiet mountain air. I picked up the stylus and wrote back, my letters clumsy compared to hers. "I am worried I will say the wrong thing." She read it, then wrote again. "You already said yes before you knew what you would have to do. I could not argue with that." My fingers tightened on the stylus as I replied. "I said yes because your father expected me to say no. I did not want you to become an insult spoken in front of your entire tribe." Lyra stared at the tablet for a long time. The wind tugged at the loose strands of her black braid. Finally she wrote, "Many people pity me. I hate that." I answered without hesitation, "I do not pity you. I only dislike those who decide another person's worth by what they lack." For the first time I saw the corner of her mouth lift. Just the faintest suggestion of a smile. It was small but real. She called over an elderly orc woman named Mira, who had kind eyes and patient hands. Mira began teaching me the simplest signs: me, you, water, eat, pain, danger, thank you. My fingers felt thick and stupid. I fumbled every gesture. Lyra watched without impatience, but with the steady judgment of someone who had learned to read far more than words. When I made the same mistake twice, she reached across the table, took my hand in hers, and gently folded my fingers into the correct shape. Her touch was warm and surprisingly careful for a warrior's daughter. Later, when the war drums began to beat outside in the training yard, Lyra did not flinch at the thunderous sound. Instead, she placed her palm flat against the stone railing. I watched her eyes close for a moment as she felt the vibrations travel through the rock. She could tell the difference between light footsteps, the heavy tread of a war horse, the creak of a gate opening, and even the presence of someone standing behind her. The world had not taken sound from her. It had simply taught her to listen with bone and skin and sight. That evening, one of the elders named Gorvak approached me in the torchlit corridor. His voice was low and hostile. "A human man cannot be husband to a princess of the Black Fang. You said yes only for politics." I did not raise my voice. I simply said, "Then watch me learn." I returned to the veranda where Lyra waited. She tested me, speeding up her signs until they blurred. I missed most of them. She wrote on the tablet. "Are you angry?" I wrote back, "Yes, at myself." She answered, "Good. Do not be angry at me." I laughed again, softer this time, and nodded. She held my gaze longer than before. That night, I sat alone in the small guest chamber they had given me. The clay tablet rested on my knee. I practiced the signs until my wrists ached and my fingers cramped. I no longer practiced to survive the chieftain's 3-day test. I practiced because, for the first time, I wanted Lyra to stop reading the world alone. I wanted to step into her silence and speak with her there. The second day of the test began when a pair of orc guards escorted me to the training yard at dawn. The entire tribe seemed to be watching. Warriors lined the edges of the wide stone square, their arms crossed, eyes narrowed. I felt every stare like a spear point against my back. Lyra was already there, standing among the hunters. She no longer wore the soft ceremonial leather she had on in the great hall. Instead, she was dressed in practical hunting gear. scarred leather jerkin, bracers reinforced with bone, and a short, recurved bow slung across her back. Her black braid was tied tight. She looked every inch the warrior she was raised to be. A grizzled orc released 3 wooden discs into the air at once. They spun wildly in different directions. Lyra did not wait for any shouted command. She simply watched their flight, drew, and loosed 3 arrows in rapid succession. Each disc shattered midair. The hunters grunted in approval. No one clapped. They simply noted it, the same way they noted the color of the sky or the direction of the wind. Tharok stepped forward. His voice rolled across the yard like distant thunder. "Take my daughter into the stone forest. Find the 3 signal flags planted there. You will use only signs, no spoken words. If you become lost or slow her down, you fail. The tribe will watch." I understood this was no longer about salt or iron or treaties. This was about whether I could walk beside Lyra in her world instead of forcing her into mine. We left the camp and entered the stone forest. The land here was savage, jagged ridges of black rock, narrow crevices that dropped into shadow, thickets of thorn vine that tore at cloth and skin. Old hunter traps lay hidden beneath loose stones. Lyra moved ahead of me like a shadow over water, her steps silent, her balance perfect. I followed, trying desperately to remember the signs Mira had taught me the night before. Stop, left, crouch, tracks. I made the first mistake within minutes. I misread her shoulder shift and stepped where I should have waited. A loose stone slid beneath my boot and clattered into a crevice. Lyra's hand shot back, fingers closing on my sleeve, yanking me to a halt. Her gray-green eyes were cold as mountain ice when she turned. She signed, slowly, deliberately, "Look before you think." I nodded, shame burning in my chest. She did not wait for apology. She simply continued. I stopped trying to guess what she wanted. Instead, I watched. I watched the way her shoulders changed direction half a heartbeat before her feet moved. I watched her eyes flick downward when the ground grew treacherous. I watched her palm brush against exposed rock, feeling for vibrations only she could read. When I finally stopped forcing her to match my pace and simply followed hers, the forest opened. We found the first signal flag wedged in a wind-scoured cleft between 2 boulders. The second flag was harder. The third nearly killed us. On the return path, I spotted fresh claw marks on the trunk of a dead ironwood tree, deep, parallel gouges made by something large. Wolf stone. Lyra had not seen them. Her attention was on the ridge ahead. I tried to sign danger, but my fingers slipped in haste. The gesture came out almost identical to the sign for water. Lyra frowned, confused. There was no time to correct myself. I lunged forward and grabbed her by the waist, dragging her down behind a massive fallen slab of rock just as a huge wolf stone burst from the underbrush. Its gray hide rippled with muscle, yellow eyes locked on the spot where Lyra had stood a heartbeat earlier. The beast's jaws snapped shut on empty air. Lyra's hand went to the knife at her belt. I signed again, slower this time, forcing my fingers to obey. "Wait. 2. She pressed her palm to the stone beneath us. Her eyes widened slightly. She felt the second set of vibrations I had seen in the tracks. There were 2. We moved together without a single spoken word. Lyra rose just enough to draw her bow. The first arrow took the lead beast through the throat before it could leap. The second wolfstone charged from the side. I snatched up a fallen hunter's spear and drove it upward with both hands. The iron point punched through muscle and bone. The creature's weight slammed into me, driving me back against the rock. But it did not reach Lyra. When the echoes of the struggle died, we stood over 2 dead wolfstones. Blood darkened the stones beneath our boots. Lyra's breathing was steady, mine was ragged. She turned to me, placed her right hand flat over her own heart, then pointed the same hand at me. The gesture was simple, but I understood its weight. She took out the small clay tablet she carried and wrote quickly, "This time, you heard." I took the stylus and wrote back, my hand still trembling slightly from the fight. "I looked at you for the first time since I had met her." Lyra smiled, a real smile, small and fierce and unguarded. It transformed her face. The scar of silence that the world had tried to press onto her seemed, for one bright moment, to lift. When we returned to the camp, the warriors saw us carrying the 3 signal flags and the pelts of the wolfstones slung across our shoulders. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Gorvak, who had mocked me openly the day before, said nothing. He simply watched with narrowed eyes. Tharok stood at the edge of the training yard. His gaze moved from the pelts to his daughter, then settled on me for a long time. Something had shifted in the test. Lyra was no longer merely a prize being offered in marriage. She was choosing whether to let me walk beside her. And for the first time, I realized she did not need to be saved. She had been living powerfully in her silence long before I arrived. The night before the final day of the test, Lyra led me through the sleeping camp to a high stone ledge that overlooked the main fire pit. The valley below glowed with the warm light of the great communal fire, and the distant sound of low chanting drifted up like smoke. She sat on the smooth rock and motioned for me to sit beside her. Without a word, she took my hand and pressed my palm flat against the cold stone. Then she tapped a slow, deliberate rhythm. Short tap. Yes. Long tap. No. 3 light taps. I am here. She repeated the pattern until I could feel the difference through bone and skin. This was how she spoke when darkness swallowed the signs, and even the sharpest eyes failed. I practiced until my fingers learned the language of vibration. When I finally managed 3 clean light taps against the stone, she placed her own hand over mine and answered with the same rhythm. I am here. She pulled out the small clay tablet we now carried everywhere. In the firelight, her writing was steady and sure. If you marry me, you will be suspected by both sides. I took the stylus. I am already used to suspicion. She read it, then wrote again, her eyes never leaving the tablet. If I can never hear your voice. I set the stylus down and signed the answer slowly, carefully, the way she had taught me. I will learn to make you feel it. Lyra looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached out, placed 2 fingers against the inside of my wrist, and tapped 3 light beats directly against my skin. I am here. The touch lingered. For the first time, I understood that her silence was not emptiness. It was a different kind of presence, deeper and more honest than most spoken words I had ever known. Morning came too quickly. The council hall was packed. Every elder, every warrior of rank, every shaman sat in a great circle around the central fire. Tharok occupied his stone throne, face unreadable. Gorvak stood at the center, his voice loud and venomous. This human's yes is an insult to our blood. Lyra cannot hear the orders of battle. She cannot lead hunters. She cannot bear strong heirs for a true alliance. She is a weakness we can no longer afford. I propose she be given in marriage to a warrior of our own blood who can control her and protect the honor of the Black Fang. The hall stirred with uneasy agreement. Weapons shifted. Eyes turned toward Lyra, who stood tall and motionless beside her father. I did not wait to be invited. I stepped forward into the open circle. Several warriors reached for their axes. The air grew thick with threat. I raised my hands to show they were empty and turned first to Lyra. I signed the question I had practiced all night. May I speak? She gave one sharp nod. I began signing, slow and deliberate so the whole hall could see. Mira, the old servant, translated my signs in a clear, caring voice, so that even those who did not understand the gestures would hear the meaning. You say she cannot hear battle orders. Yet yesterday in the stone forest she felt a wolf stone through the rock before any of you with 2 good ears heard its breath. You say she cannot be a bridge between our peoples, yet none of you have ever tried to cross the bridge you now call broken. I turned fully to Lyra and signed so the entire council could watch. I am not marrying her out of pity. I will marry her if she wants me. She does not need to be fixed. Mira's voice echoed the words across the silent hall. A ripple of shock moved through the warriors. Gorvak's face darkened with rage. Before anyone could interrupt, Lyra stepped forward. She did not use the tablet. She walked to the great ritual drumstone at the center of the hall and struck it once with her open palm. A single powerful vibration that rolled through the floor and up into every chest. Then she signed before the entire tribe, her movements proud and unhurried. Mira translated. I am deaf, not stupid. I am silent, not weak. If this tribe needs ears to survive, you would all have died long ago. Some warriors barked short, surprised laughs. Others looked away, ashamed. Gorvak's face turned the color of old blood. Lyra was not finished. She signed again, faster now, anger sharpening every gesture. Mira struggled to keep pace. For years, Gorvak has changed the hunting signals so I would look slow. He bribed messengers. He kept me from important councils. He does not want me as chieftain's daughter. He wants his own son in my place." She pulled from her belt a small leather pouch and emptied it onto the stone floor. Inside were 3 carved signal bones, the kind used to send orders during hunts. Each bone had been deliberately altered, the notches deepened or filled with wax to change their meaning. Proof. The hall erupted. Tharok rose from his throne like a mountain waking. His voice cracked like thunder as he stripped Gorvak of his seat on the council and ordered him taken away to await judgment. When the noise finally settled, Tharok turned to me. His scarred eyes studied me with new weight. "The first time I asked if you would marry my daughter, you answered too quickly. Now I ask again before the whole tribe, do you still say yes?" I did not speak first. I turned to Lyra and signed the words clearly so every eye in the hall could see them. Yes, if she also chooses me. The silence that followed was heavier than any before it. Lyra looked at me. Her gray-green eyes held mine without blinking. Then she stepped forward until we stood only an arm's length apart. She reached out and placed 2 fingers against the inside of my wrist once more. 3 light, deliberate taps. I am here. And in that moment, with the entire Black Fang tribe watching, I understood that the real test had never been 3 days. It had only ever been this. Lyra stepped forward until only the space of a single breath remained between us. The entire hall held its silence like a drawn bowstring. She reached out, placed 2 fingers against the inside of my wrist, and tapped 3 light, deliberate beats directly against my skin. I am here. Then she signed, her movements clear and unhurried so every eye in the great hall could follow. I choose. Mira's voice carried the translation across the stone chamber, but I did not need to hear it. I had already understood from the rhythm of her fingers and the steady gray-green certainty in her eyes. Tharok rose slowly from his throne. The scar across his eye seemed deeper in the firelight. For a long moment he looked at his daughter, then at me, weighing something only a father and chieftain could weigh. At last his voice rolled out like distant thunder. "The betrothal is recognized! But this will not be a marriage of empty words, Fenric Vale. You will remain with us for 1 full moon. You will learn our ways, our signs, our rhythms, until you can walk beside my daughter without shame. Lyra, you will learn the writing and laws of the humans so that no treaty can ever deceive you again. Only then will the Union stand." It was no longer a political bargain. It was preparation for something real. The days that followed became a quiet education in each other. Every morning I sat with Mira and the old sign masters, my fingers growing sore and clumsy as I practiced the full language of the Black Fang. I learned how to shape hunt, storm, promise, and the subtle differences between "I am with you" and "I stand beside you." Lyra watched without mockery, only correcting me when my hands lied. In the afternoon she joined me. We practiced together on the high veranda, the clay tablet between us growing crowded with our shared words. In return, I taught her the flowing script of Greyford, the precise legal phrases of treaties, and the small symbols that could bind or break alliances. She learned quickly, her stylus moving with the same precision she used to nock an arrow. Sometimes she would pause, frown at a difficult letter, and then look up at me with a challenge in her eyes that needed no translation. We made mistakes constantly. I signed danger when I meant beautiful. She wrote a clause that accidentally granted the orcs rights to every river in the valley. Each error ended in the same place. Laughter that needed no sound, only the shared glance and the small shake of her head that said, "Again." One night, long after the fires had burned low, we sat on the stone ledge where she had first taught me the language of vibration. The camp below was quiet. Lyra took my hand and pressed my palm to her chest so I could feel the steady beat of her heart. Then she placed her own fingers over my heart and tapped the exact same rhythm against my skin. "I hear you." That was how our feelings grew, not in grand declarations, but in small, deliberate acts. The way she saved the best cut of meat for my bull. The way I learned to stand on her left side so she could see my signs more easily. The way she would press 3 light taps against my wrist every evening before we parted, a private promise that tomorrow we would still be learning each other. The wedding took place in the great hall at the turning of the moon. There were no loud songs for Lyra to miss. Instead, the entire tribe gathered around the massive ritual drumstone and placed their palms upon it. When they struck together, the floor itself vibrated with one deep, rolling heartbeat that traveled up through our boots and into our bones. Lyra closed her eyes and smiled as the rhythm washed over her. She felt the blessing of her people in the only way that had ever been honest to her. When it was my turn to speak the vows, I did not use a long scroll of human words. I stepped forward and signed before the whole tribe, "I will not speak for you. I will stand beside you. I will learn when I do not understand." Lyra's eyes shone. She answered with her own signs, clear and proud. "I will not leave you alone among my people. I will hear you in my own way." Tharok bound our wrists with a cord of braided black and silver leather. When he cut the cord, the 2 pieces fell away, yet something stronger remained between us. I was no longer only the envoy from Greyford. I was husband to Lyra of the Black Fang, and together we became the living bridge between 2 peoples who had spent generations learning how to hate each other. Some still whispered. Some still watched us with suspicion, but when the council met and Lyra read the movements of every speaker while I studied the written clauses, when we caught a deliberate mistranslation before it could spark new conflict, the whispers grew quieter. Respect took root where doubt had grown. The story began when a chieftain pointed at me and asked if I would marry his deaf daughter. I answered yes, because I refused to let her silence become an insult. I never imagined how much I would gain by stepping into that silence. Lyra taught me that silence is not a void, it is a different country, filled with rhythm, vibration, careful sight, and the kind of listening that happens with the whole body. I came to Karmorak to sign a treaty of salt and iron. In the end, the real treaty was written in the space between heartbeats, in the language of 3 light taps against skin, and in the quiet understanding that 2 people who were never meant to meet could choose to build a world where they belonged together.